All right, guys, welcome to the Difference Makers. Today we have with us a special guest. We have Rob Fraser, who is of the Outway brand. Outway has recently rebranded from Endur Apparel and is now going to be, and we're going to dive into the details of all of this in just a minute here, but Outway Socks and Apparel. Rob, welcome to the show.
Justin, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
So I kind of fumbled over the intro a little bit because I wanted to say Endure a couple times, and then I was like, I had to reset myself a little bit. So Outway is your brand. You guys are a sock company based on Vancouver Island. Tell us a little bit more because you guys have been Endure for the past how many years now? 5, 6 years?
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, it's going to be a weird, transition period as with any change or name change, especially with kind of like you've said, we're in our sixth year, so there's been 5 years of going by one name and only, a couple weeks now of going by our new name. So even I find myself someone who's had kind of 6 months to sort of know this is coming and know about the new name. I still find myself sometimes fumbling over it. And look, Endure and our past name is still a part of who we are, so it's not like it's someone says it and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like you should be calling us Outway. It's like it's whatever. It's that was a part and we've evolved into the new name. And so it's not so much of a change as an evolution as I like to think about it. So one or the other, like I think it's totally fine. And like we built 5 years of reputation around one name and it's gonna take time to build reputation around the new one. So like in that transitional period, honestly doesn't bother me. I love our old name. We'll get into it, but we changed it as a result of external circumstances, not because we necessarily felt like we wanted to or we didn't like it. So we still love the name, and it's a part of who we are and a part of kind of like our culture and what we believe and think and how we approach life and athletics and all of that. So long-winded answer of saying, yeah, like Outway or Endure, but Outway today is, we're one of North America's leading performance sock brands. We've kind of merged technical innovation on an often overlooked, apparel or hosiery category. We've added an expressive and performance element to it to combine, combine and create the ultimate kind of sock or piece of clothing that's both expressive and technically advanced for athletes as well as everyday life.
And with that, I mean, people can wear these socks for anything. You guys are primarily in more endurance sports, it seems like right now.
Yeah, I would say like the sports in which that we kind of focus on and we've got a lot of traction, I'd say are the ones that most closely follow kind of the sock trend. So like if we look at cycling, for example, it's one of the it's like literally like part of the cycling law. This the type of socks you wear and the designs you wear and how you differentiate and express yourself. And that's how I originally got into it as a cyclist. I before owning a sock company, I was obsessed with socks and actually had a sock sponsorship from another brand while I was competing. And and so yeah, it's always been in my kind of blood for 10 years before starting the brand that like socks are part of the culture, a part of me, a part of the everyday sort of expressive nature of myself. But yeah, you're right. Like our socks are designed first and foremost to because when we look at our product, like performance is one of our key operating principles. So like if we're going to design a product, we believe that that product, regardless of how it'll be used, should be able to perform at the highest level, meaning that like this should be a sock that can win Olympic gold medals in a running race or a cycling event. And like we've seen that happen and we know that to be true. However, it doesn't change the fact that we also design our socks to be both beautiful, comfortable, durable, so that they can be used transitionally throughout the rest of the day. Like our socks can be on the podium or win an Olympic race, but they can also be worn in a boardroom or to your fanciest event. They're going to look better, stay up, be more comfortable than any good looking sock on the market, bar none.
Dude,
Like, so that's the magic. But that's the secondary focus, whereas like the top focus is always designing them to be technically uh, and technically designed for performance and above anything else, but then designed beautifully to be worn throughout the entire day.
yeah. And what uh, I mean, there's so many things I want to start off with before we get too deep into like the design process in that. But I want to talk about you and your start. You mentioned when you were competing in cycling, you had this. So you were a 5-time national team member. Did I get
Yeah,
that
that's right.
correct? So
Yeah.
what was your primary discipline
Yeah,
in
so
cycling?
I raced downhill mountain biking. So like for people that aren't aware, like the downhill ski equivalent. So basically, time trial. You take a chairlift to the top of the mountain with your bike, and you're racing against the clock through a confined course through the trees, jumps, rocks. Generally between 3 to 5 minutes long. Average speeds, 50, 60 kilometers an hour. Super dangerous. And yeah, it is a time trial. You get one chance at it, and you're racing the clock, and whoever's the fastest down the hill at that time wins. And so yeah, I spent 10 years basically racing at my way up through the professional ranks, and yeah, 5 times on the national team, represented our country at a bunch of world championships, and yeah, that was like my life and what I thought was going to be my life. And we can talk about that transition to business, but yeah, I just like I love sport, and that's kind of why I do what I do today is to just find a way to still be involved in sport.
Yeah. Because I mean, downhill cycling is no joke.
Yeah.
Like watching that go on, I was in Whistler. I believe it was the week before or the week after Crankworks, but people were still using all the setups that were already there.
Yeah.
And so Crankworks is a huge downhill mountain bike competition, correct?
Yeah, well, it kind of brings all disciplines together. So there's a downhill race, there's like a slope style race, which is like the tricks, and then every other discipline, cross country, endurance events, etc. So it's more of a bike mountain bike per se, mountain bike festival where like
Yeah.
everything from like a kids race to the top pinnacle events, which would be the downhill event and the slope style event.
Nice. And so, but that event is crazy to watch. Like just watching the practice runs I was seeing was nuts.
Yeah, and Whistler does it right, like they're known for having some of the more gnarly features and pushing the limits on what you'd expect to see people do.
Yeah. So now going from that and transitioning into business, like I feel like as a I mean, I played college sports and then trying to figure out what I'm going to do after college sports, like being a professional and, continuing that on into your adult life, like that's got to be a hard transition going from professional athlete into kind of regular everyday life. Was it a difficult process for you to kind of figure out what you wanted to do once you retired?
Yeah, and honestly, like the retirement was like kind of my own choice because I did not feel that I was going to reach the level I needed to kind of make it a more sustainable career. I was making some money, but not enough. And I was also, it's a, like, as you said, it's dangerous sport and it's generally favors the young. And even at like in your mid 20s, you're getting old in the sport. And so I was just looking like, okay, well, even if I had 5 more years in this sport, like, am I able to make kind of the impact or financial outcome I need to kind of like transition to something else? Or am I better off kind of pulling the plug now and getting a head start on what's next? And I made the tough decision. That year I decided to retire. I came off a season where I was ranked number 2 in the country that season, and so like I was still super competitive. I still loved it. It was just unfortunately one of those decisions you have to make in life where, although you love it and it's like you can do it, it's just maybe not the right thing. And honestly,
Mhm.
like now looking back, I wish I kind of walked away 2 3 years earlier. Um, but you never know, like, because like I love what I do now, and even more of a head start, like it would have been even better, obviously. But
Yeah.
hindsight's beautiful. But yeah, like when deciding to walk away, I didn't have like a plan for what was next. So it was like this 2 year period of trying to figure that out before I ultimately ended up starting my business. But that looked like coaching, doing my own kind of little coaching business, helping other athletes. It went back to school for sport management, got a job at the Canadian Sport Institute helping athletes because I thought like the natural progression would be using the tools and skills and insights I learned as an athlete and to help others. And that could be through coaching or sport programs or whatever, or the organization. But, realized in that 2 years that like that wasn't fulfilling for me, mainly on an impact level, like in those roles and jobs, I could not affect the kind of change I wanted to. I really wanted to like get back to the global stage with something, and this wasn't it, and it wasn't my thing. When I look back to sport, it's actually like, at least for me, it was super entrepreneurial. What I actually like really enjoyed the most in hindsight was kind of the planning, the preparation, the training, the negotiating my sponsorship contracts, like the finance operations side of it, like traveling global, like booking global travel. I really enjoyed the process and like the building my own personal brand and business in the cycling industry and like marketing myself, etc. So really what I've done with our business today is just like replicate that, but make it more than just me and make it much more about a brand and scale that. So it's yeah, in hindsight, I'm not sure it was always about the sport as much as it was just like I was good at that sport, was able to kind of like manifest a lot of my entrepreneurial tendencies in it.
Now, I mean, I kind of like that story. I not kind of. I like that story. I like that transition and that realization that that's where you wanted to be. Because I mean, as a professional mountain biker, it's probably different than being a professional baseball player. Like, were you managing more of your own sponsorship deals and travel and all that stuff? Were you doing that all yourself?
Yeah, and honestly, like pro mountain biker is like much different than like making it to the NBA or NHL or whatever. Like the bar is honestly, and like this will make me seem less legit or cool, but like it's not that high to be a pro mountain biker, you know, like
Yeah,
it's a much more developing sport. And like, and look, I was never the like, you know, top kind of like 40 or 50 in the world. I was like good in Canada. I could make it to the world events and did and represent our country in the world champs, but like it's not like I was like, you know, I don't think I was the equivalent of like would have made like the NBA or something in like a more competitive or mature industry. So like, sure, I was really good at mountain biking, but I'd say like the bar and level to entry was like a little more accessible than maybe more developed sports. So like, pro sounds cool, but yeah, it was like super kind of like you'd be surprised at how like maybe not pro it is on the back end. You know, it's like there's not a lot of athletes in that sport that actually have managers and like stuff like that. Like I'd say maybe 1% of the pro athletes that are pro like have that, but I
yeah,
was managing everything. I mean, I had teams and sponsors and mechanics and stuff like that. Like it wasn't, you know, just me, but it certainly wasn't to the level of like I had a business manager and a sponsorship manager and all that kind of
yeah.
stuff.
And I feel like that's actually really similar to the way CrossFit operates now. Is like the top of the top, they'll have their managers and their teams around them, but there's a lot more people who you see as like pros who are still managing themselves and doing all that work themselves.
Yeah,
I think
and
it's
that's
very
a
similar.
good example. That's a good CrossFit, you know, cycling, even running, you know, like all these more like in like there's team aspects to it, but they're more individual sports. Whereas like the big, large team sports or government funded Olympic sports, like they have a
Yeah,
lot more infrastructure built. So like maybe I'm not even that correct with saying like the bar was lower to enter. It's just that it's not as organized, I should say. So like there's just a lot more like there's not a lot of support for that like middle group of professionals that you would find in these bigger organizations. So it's a lot more rudimentary and a lot more like off the cuff and less professional from the inside looking than like you
yeah,
would expect. You hear pro athlete and you think Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, etc. It's like that's just not the reality for like 99.9% of pro athletes, like
yeah,
straight up.
100%. So now transitioning from going from that, kind of realizing you didn't want to be in the sport world as much with the sport specifically. How did you start to grow your brand? Because you grew from almost nothing, just being by yourself, correct? Excuse me.
Yeah,
How do you
it was fully nothing. You know, like the original idea was just me putting up an Instagram page and a post from my like basement suite on my phone. Like that was it. You know, like
Yeah.
beyond nothing. And then, you know, next day went down to the local mall and went to Lids, which is like a hat store, and they can do customization. So I got my logo put on the hat and got like 10 made and took them to school with me and was like, yo, I have a brand, like who wants to buy some of these hats? And I was in business. Like that was it.
Yeah.
That was like what I knew from like I think what maybe made me a little different, I would say, like in those early days was like I had learned that like through cycling, like, you just have to start and like there's never a perfect time. There's never the plan. Like I think a lot of people would be like, oh, I'm gonna start a business, so I need to have like a business plan, and like they wouldn't necessarily just like go to Lids the next day and get hats and get like try to sell them. I just like I knew that like that was like the quickest way to start learning and just to go out there and start doing it rather than like writing my thoughts down because I would eventually just probably convince myself not to start if I did that. Um, but to answer kind of like the question, growth basically just looked like I wanted to like solve my own problem. I wanted to build a brand that was like for the everyday athlete. As an athlete who transitioned out, I found like some of the brands and athletes I looked up to weren't as relevant to me as like just a normal person now, like not a full-time athlete. So I was like,
Yeah.
where's the athletic brand that talks more about like pursuit of personal bests, or just like, just making it to the gym, which was like exceptionally hard,
Yeah.
um, with like a busier schedule. I had to work. I was in school. Like it was much harder. Like before, my entire day was dedicated to just like eating well and going to the gym and biking. It's like pretty easy to exercise when that's like your entire day. Um, and so I wanted to build a brand, so that I was like, well, okay, if I have that brand, there's surely other people that are kind of similar to me. Let's build a brand ambassador network and like get them to start promoting our values. And it was just like really kind of low cost acquisition stuff like that, of like, how do we market the brand? How can we just get it out there? How can we start to spread this message? And that was really it.
And then starting that build, were you working with custom designers? Like how did that whole start to be able to develop the product you have? Because a lot of the products have, fairly high design value with them.
Yeah, I taught myself everything. It was just basically me. I had a co-founder who helped out with some of like the back end operations stuff, but in terms of like design, marketing, all the stuff you see from the outside, even the storytelling and stuff like that, the website, um, I taught myself. So I learned Illustrator and Photoshop. Like I learned how to source and manufacture products overseas. I taught myself kind of the technical aspects of the product and how those need to be improved, how to like run a website and dispatch and all that stuff. And like this isn't rocket science, I think it is very hard, but it's
Mhm.
it's really not that complicated. I think the hardest part is just putting in the time and like being able to persist day over day with like that feeling of failure, because like everything is like an uphill battle when you're trying to figure out like 10 things at once and they're all complicated. So again, I think what made me maybe a little more uniquely qualified to start something like this was that, again, in cycling, like nothing was handed to me. Like I had to teach myself. Like when I was 16, I just took a flight to Italy, and like there was connecting flights in Germany and etc. And like I had no idea what the hell I was doing. Like I didn't even know where Italy was. I thought it was somewhere in North America, and that's not a joke. Like, like I like geography was one of my least favorite subjects in school. Um, just a dumb kid. Like I was like, why do I need to know anything about this? And but I got on a plane. I was like, I'm going to Italy, and like figured it out. And so like I just learned that like, hey, these things, most things in life can just be figured out. Like you don't need to go hire someone to do design. Like you're more than capable to do it. I think a lot of people like underestimate their capabilities. Like I think we've learned, maybe as a generation, or people have learned, that like everything should just be kind of outsourced, or like there's like our entire generation is just getting their hand held through life now. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
participation medals, and like, no, someone can help you with this, and like, oh my God, your feelings are hurt. Like, let's bend the rules for you. It's like, no, how about you just like fucking grow up and figure it out? Like life's not fair, and sometimes you just got to put the work in. Like it's pretty simple.
And I think that that's what a lot of people avoid now, is just trying to put the work in to get to where they want to go.
Well, yeah,
And
we live in a world right now of like people wanting to shift, equal opportunity to equal outcome.
mhm,
Sorry, that's not how life works. Like you're not owed anything. Everything is earned. And people just like to look now. I think because we have so much access to other people, like through social media, and there's just so much input, that like it almost feels unfair that maybe you're not where they are. Whereas before, maybe you didn't see it all and you weren't exposed, and like you were a little more like, okay, well, if I want to get there, it's up to me. Um, and now I don't know fully why, but like I've always operated from the understanding that like I'm owed nothing. And I think that's the beautiful thing about sport, is like professional sport or competitive sport. I'm not talking about kind of recreational sport where now everyone's a winner, right? Like I'm talking about like legitimate competition where you show up and you're ranked and there's no faking it. Like if you didn't train, let's use CrossFit for an example. You show up to, let's just say, the CrossFit uh, whatever, the open or games here in Canada. Like if you didn't train, you're gonna be out in the first round. Like you're not gonna be able to do the pull-ups or the exercise. Like there's no one gonna be there that's gonna come grab your legs and help you up. It's like you're out, you're
yeah.
done. And the winners, you understand why they won. You can just look at them, right? And you're like, that person put the work in. And I think that's like the beautiful thing about sport is it's almost like one of the last things in this world where like it's super clear that the person that works hard like actually reaps the reward, right? And like unfortunately in many other areas of life that's just not the case anymore. It's just like, oh, that person worked really hard, but because of XYZ rule, like it doesn't matter. And this person who worked half as hard is going to get the same outcome as you, like generally in the workplace. And it's just pathetic, I think. Like, I think it's like we're just going backwards and it's no way to run the world. And there's a time and place for that kind of thing. And there's definitely inequities and fairnesses that need to be solved. And I'm not blind to that. But I think in most cases, we're not putting the work in.
Yeah. I very much agree with you that I think the work needs to be put in for a lot of these. I mean, there's so many different things that we could be talking about right now, or we can be applying this to, but I think everything comes down to just putting that work in and putting the time in to be able to grow and become successful at whatever you're doing. And I
Yeah.
liked your messaging earlier about just starting.
Yeah. And I think that's like, is look, I think one of the main things that like stop people from just starting or not putting the work in is because that they don't realize that failure over and over and over again is like the key component of that. Like
Yeah.
it's not just straight and up to the right. Like, and that's the other beautiful thing about work about sport is like what I learned as an athlete was, I raced like 10 to 15 times a year and maybe won once, right? Like I failed
Mm-hmm.
the majority of my career. If like if failure was defined by not winning, then technically I failed like almost all the time. And same with like a lot of athletes say this, like they missed way more shots and like uh, like they missed way more shots than they got in or whatever in
Yeah.
basketball or something like that. So it's like um but it's not technically failure, it's just learning. You're just putting in the reps, you're just doing the work. And I think a lot of people just realize that like or like nowadays like they don't persist, they just have that initial failure and they're like, well, I guess this isn't for me or this isn't fair or I'm not good enough. It's like, well, no, like everything, like I put in $1,000 to start this business and I've learned so many hard lessons over the 5 years, like failed so many times. And
Yeah.
like I've just persisted. I just decided that this wasn't going to be what took me down. And here we are today. And there's still a lot of work ahead of us, but like it's not been easy.
Oh no. I think anybody who thinks being an entrepreneur is easy is very mistaken. And anybody who tries it learns very quickly that it is a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah. And it's, yeah, I mean, like there's a lot of benefits, obviously, and there's a lot of upsides, but it's like anything. It's like, again, like sport, and any athlete would tell you, it's like, as an outsider looking into a professional athlete, it's like you see when they're on the podium, you see them like getting the accolades or signing autographs or whatever, but you don't see the 99% of the time where they're starving themselves to make weight or they're exceptionally stressed out or they're doing the 6 a.m. run in the rain or they're doing like all of these things that you don't see. And they're just uncomfortable almost all the time. You don't see that, right? So like it definitely skews the perception of like what it really means to be, a top performer in these different areas.
Mhm.
Because the media just kind of like highlights the good stuff. For every one person that there's a documentary on Netflix about, there's like hundreds of thousands or millions of people that didn't make it.
Oh, millions easily. Yeah.
Yeah.
You look at those kinds of things like Michael Jordan. There's something like Michael Jordan was cut from his like grade 9 or grade 10 basketball team.
Hmm.
What's up, guys? Justin here. I'm really sorry to interrupt the show, but we're here to talk about something special. This is to talk about Bionic. Bionic is a first of its kind AI-based motion tracking mobility test that's designed to show you what your body is really doing. We've designed 7 unique tests that show you your range of motion for different joints throughout your entire body and how they work together. Once you're done the test, you'll be given a body map score, which breaks down your entire body and their different range of motion. From there, the WODProof app will also design a mobility program specifically tailored to your needs and the things you want to improve. I can't wait for you guys to try out the test. Go download the WODProof app today, start your free 7-day trial, and try Bionic today. All right, guys, back to the show.
And like that's the failure, that's the beginning process. Like that could have been the catalyst for the entire, one of the greatest basketball players, if not the greatest basketball player we've ever seen, being
For sure.
cut and failing.
Well, and yeah, in his own words, like not a direct quote, but like I think what he said was that like that was a huge motivation for him. That was like a driver to actually, prove that coach wrong, right? And
Mhm.
like and Jordan's famous for like making or having enemies in his mind, whether or not they were as kind of like the catalyst or the driver to overcome um, all the incredible feats he's had. Um, but I think the average person would have taken that as the end. Oh, I
Yeah.
got cut. Like I guess this is the end of the road. And I guess that's a great example because like that's not the end. It ain't over till it's over.
Yeah.
And it's really up to you. And sometimes I think there's an equally true group of people that sometimes need to know when to pack it in at the same time.
Yeah.
But I think generally speaking, more people are just not giving it a fair shot.
Yeah. Now, with you guys just had to go through a big rebrand. You guys had some external factors. Was that something that was like a catalyst for you to kind of grind more, to work harder? Like, what was that when you first got approached about this? And I'll let you speak to everything there, but um, was that a catalyst for the change or for wanting more from the company? Or, obviously you didn't pack it in.
Yeah, and honestly, like, so we were 5 years in at this point, big team, like kind of like the business from the outside looks like it's working, and it is.
Hmm.
And it's all the things up to like, if we walk it even further back, like 2 years into the business, I had to buy out my co-founder. I had to come up with like $150,000, which at the time to me was like $150 million, like no
Yeah.
joke. And that was super difficult. And that was a catalyst moment to be like, okay, well, I'm gonna have to put 150 grand into this business and go into kind of personal debt. And this is some serious skin in the game. So that was the first time where it's like, okay, is this the business that I feel like I'm gonna like dedicate my entire life to? I was obviously into it at that point, but that's where it's like really skin in the game, all in. So that was kind of like the first thing that happened. That was kind of like honestly 50-50, maybe even less of a chance of me making it through that. Like I almost had to walk away and the business almost collapsed because of this, like from financial pressure. And then a couple of years later, then COVID happens, right? And that's another moment
Hmm.
where it's like, who knows what's going to happen? It was super gnarly for that first month. Like the whole world was kind of figuring what's going on. And, I made a commitment to not cut pay of my core team. And that was super stressful and whatever, but like we got through that. And, so it's kind of like moment number two, not as drastic, but moment two. And then, yeah, this one was like, there was just a lot more, and the stakes get higher because there's a lot more riding on it. At this point, we're like nearly 15 full-time people, 10 part-time people. We were just closing in the midst of closing like an investment round for $3.2 million. And then, you know, I get an email that basically I can't get into the details too much. That basically states that like shows that we're like possibly gonna have to go through a rebrand and change our name. And to me, I'm like, that feels like a death blow. It's like, well, we've
Yeah.
built this brand around a name for 5 years, and so like the immediate reaction was kind of like that sinking feeling, that sick to your stomach, kind of like, what am I gonna do? But honestly, like within the hour and a couple hours, it did shift towards like, okay, we're gonna figure it out. Like this is not a death blow, nothing is, and this is gonna suck and it's really hard, but we'll figure it out. And ultimately, like if you decide that you're gonna go forward and kind of like grind it out, I think you have to then adopt the mindset that this was like meant to be and that you're going to use this as an opportunity to actually evolve and grow even more, right? This isn't just surviving. This is, in your words, like a catalyst to evolve and to like truly make something of the opportunity, which we did on the buyout, which we did on COVID, and now we've done again on the rebrand. So it's like, I think that's the difference. It's not just like fighting and surviving. It's like, okay, you know what? Like maybe similar to the Michael Jordan thing, it's like, we're going to change our name, and you know what, it's going to be 10 times bigger than our other brand was, so like, let's go.
Hmm. Now, since the rebrand, have you guys made any changes to like structurally to the company, or like how you guys go about your day-to-day business? Or is it like it's just a straight up rebrand and then now we're grinding harder?
um I would say like at its most foundational level, like everything's remained the same except our name. Like we have the same logo, team, ownership structure, products, manufacturers, processes for the most part.
Mhm.
However, every piece of that got dug into to make sure it was just like on mission, on value, for the right reasons. Can it be improved? Can it be elevated? So like I think most mentally stable people would have just like decided that changing the name would be hard enough, but we were like, okay, let's just like dig into the entire business at the same time and just come out like absolutely swinging on the rebrand. So that looked like, from a product standpoint, introducing new sizing, elevating the logo detail from like embroidery to a silicone heat seal patch, which is just higher quality and reduces any kind of possible irritation. Launching new products like our new caps that came out and some other stuff we have in development, website updates that make it just easier to navigate, as well as 3D renderings of our product, and then just a million other things under the hood, like refining our values, mission, why we're doing what we're doing. We moved offices to have like a more kind of like inspiring space and to kind of be able to facilitate the growth that we're going through. So everything's the same but evolved.
Good. Good. I haven't been able to see the new space yet. I gotta swing by and check that out. But
Yes,
that's
it's great.
yeah. The other space that you guys had a very like open concept with everything gorgeous. So I can imagine this one is going to be even better. So I'll have to come by and
Yeah.
check that out.
Yeah, it's just like the other one, optimized, elevated, like even bigger open space, better lighting, better desks, just better. Like we really wanted to just, like I said, like, okay, we're gonna go through this rebrand process and let's just go through it and do it. Like let's come out just like, I've said this a few times, but like it was our butterfly moment, is like what I coined as, was like over the
Mhm.
past 5 years we were this other form, and you know, we were finding our place in this world, we were learning, we have our lived experience, and then we went through this evolution. And although like in our DNA and our guts we're the same, we look a little bit different, but we've now grown wings and we're taking this brand to all new heights. You know, we're just like, we've just evolved into something that's completely, you know, bigger, better, more beautiful, and it's going to be, yeah, just exceptionally great.
Yeah. And I mean, all of this is just pretty brand new too. Like as we're talking about it here, the rebrand has only been fully announced for the last like 2 to 3 weeks, correct?
Yeah, exactly. We launched it on May 1st. So yeah, we're literally like a couple weeks in. Um and so like it's been a bit of a whirlwind, but honestly like nothing changed at the same time on our end, right? Like we still
Yeah.
do all the same things. So like it's kind of business as usual. But we're stoked on all the hard work, and it's nice to kind of not be living a double life. Before we were kind of like keeping the current name and brand like going, but like working on the other one and not being able to, like, what really gives us energy here is like constantly innovating and doing new things. And we weren't able to
Mhm.
do that for 6 months because we were doing it all on background, like in anticipation of the new launch. So
Yeah.
um, it's really nice to kind of be able to just like every day kind of know that we're investing in the new thing, you know, like
Yeah.
whereas before it's like, oh, do we want to do a huge promotion right now with the old brand name and, you know, get it on millions of eyes, or do we kind of wait? And it just killed me to wait. It's not my like personality to kind of like take the foot off the gas, but there's a time and place, and it was the right call.
How is that with managing that? Because you still have to continue to grow your brand and you still have to continue to put the work in on the brand as is until the relaunch. Um, but like how do you even decide on like the financial resources that go into that? Like you do, you know, you guys do a lot of online marketing and Facebook ads, Instagram ads, that kind of thing. Are you leaning into that as much? Do you pull off the throttle there? Like, you know, like you said, like you have a new brand coming out very shortly, or the brand is changing. How do you decide on what energy to put into that old branding, especially in like, you know, like let's just say even in 2022, after like March, when you know the launch is coming, like what do you guys do in that situation?
Yeah, it's look, there was no science to it. We just did what we felt was best. So we just focused on continually investing in the things we knew weren't changing. So luckily, like we're able to maintain the use of our logo, like this U logo for anyone who's watching. Um, it's what's been on all of our products in the past. So that was like a big win through this whole thing, is that like our logo worked with our new name, and we were able to maintain uh, a little piece of our old identity that's able to be referenced and recognized by our past customers, as well as complete product relevancy from anything we've sold in the past, because like it has the same logo on it.
Yeah.
So that was a huge win, and that definitely made our job a lot easier. So we could continue to kind of like push the product forward and like really invest in just getting the product out there. I think that's like the benefit of our business. Whereas like if it was maybe a business where we were selling something that was way more tied to the name, where that the name was a big part of the experience, like it would have been exceptionally difficult. So we just really focused on just continual investment and growth in the areas we knew weren't really going to change post name change. We started to kind of like, if you looked, you wouldn't really realize maybe from the outside, but like immediately we started pulling the name off of a lot of things. Like in our emails, our website, we just used the U. So for like about 6 months, our name Endur wasn't really being used through promotion. So we were really moving a lot of the recognition over 6 months to just the U, because we knew that that would stay as an anchor and then just kind of go back to having the new name put there. So that was a conscious effort. But yeah, like I said, there's no science. I'm sure there's a million things we could have done better, and maybe some things we did really well. But I'd say, like, for anyone else going through it or finding themselves working on something that's not live, just focus on building the things that are evergreen, that continue to go over time. Yeah, just things that are still with us.
No, I like that. That's a good conscious decision, especially with the logo, because that's actually the one thing I was surprised by when I saw the rebrand come out. I was like, oh, the logo's the same. I'm like, that works out. That's like a perfect world situation almost.
Well, yeah, and we actually through the process, so like through the renaming process, which is just an insanely painful process. Like, oh man, I'll just be so happy if I never have to do it again. Maybe finding a new name is fine, but having to like rebrand, there's a lot of extra complexities of like how does it continue the story, etc. But we decided, like, okay, we wanted, like, the initial goal was let's keep our logo, but then it soon realized that, like, by trying to find a name with like a U with a line over it or some way of incorporating that, it was putting us in a box. So we had actually made the decision that, like, we're just going to ditch the logo. Like, this is almost like 3 months into the process too, because we were just finding ourselves going in circles of trying to find a good name. We're like, we just can't compromise a strong name to try and keep this logo. Like, it's going to make the job a lot harder, but like, we ultimately have to make the best decisions. Sometimes the decisions are the hard ones. But then we came up with the new name after kind of letting go of the bias and having the logo, and then revisited, like, does this logo work? And honestly, this was like one of the only moments, not only moments, but one of the moments through this whole process that was like a light at the end of the tunnel, where like maybe this was meant to be. And when we looked at our logo, and this can be hard for anyone who's not watching to see, but if you go look at our U logo, it actually spells out. So our brand name's Outway. The logo, without knowing it, spelled out. Obviously, there's a black circle, which is an O. There's obviously a U in the logo, which is the U. And then there's a line over the U. And if you look in the negative space between the U and under the T, it creates like a negative space T. So, or under the U in line, there's negative T. So it spells out. We're like, oh my goodness, like, this new logo works with.
There we go. Here we go. I got it for you.
Yeah, there you go. So if you see like that negative space in the U, between the white and then under the white line, there's a T there. Yeah, exactly. You see it. Yeah, there you go. So it's spelled out, and we're like, wow, there's a story here. We get to keep the logo, and arguably works better than it did with our old name. There was no out in our old name or anything like that. And to us, like, the logo and name are separate parts of the brand anyways. Like, the logo is representative of the unique journey that we're all on in pursuit of a personal best. And sorry about the dog.
It's all good. All good.
I'm in the office, so like we're doing our best. But yeah, and so like it wasn't super like logo. Like if you think about it, like a reference I made is like Nike. The swoosh has nothing to do with the word Nike. It's just a logo, right? Like, or Lululemon, like their logo is an upside down A that was attached to one of their original brand name ideas, which is athletically hip, has nothing to do with Lululemon. So like, even though like our logo has a story and how it ties into the new name, it wasn't necessarily of supreme importance that it like tied in that well. But it just worked out that it did. And it was just like one of those moments of like, okay, maybe this was something that needed to happen, and this is a part of our story and evolution. It was like, okay, like, and that makes our life a lot easier by being able to keep the logo too. So that was like a pretty special moment.
I didn't realize that it actually, I've seen the logo so many times. I never considered that it has the letters in the graphic in it. And it actually, now that you pointed out, it does work way better.
Yeah, it was unintentional, which is kind of like the one of the beautiful things about this whole process is like none of that was intentional, and it only came to be after reviewing it all from like a
Mhm.
30,000 foot view and being like, what's the story here? And the story kind of presented itself, which was just, yeah, I don't know, like it was such a hard process. It was just like such a win.
Yeah. And you guys worked with another company to do the rebrand, or did you guys do it all yourself?
Yeah, like generally we pride ourselves in doing a lot of our own stuff in house, but like when it comes to something like this, it's super important to get outside perspective when you're really emotionally involved. And so, yeah, we used the local agency. And also, like, with something of this magnitude, I am a fan of getting just like world leading experts to help you, you know.
Mhm.
So, like, we got one of the best design agencies here in town and in the world, and people that have been there, done that. It's just like, you know, if we're going to invest lots of money into this and kind of want to give ourselves the best shot, you know, at success after rebranding, like we might as well do it right. So yeah, we worked with outside help on this, and it really like when you do that, if you work with an agency that does their job right, really what they're doing is extracting your own ideas out of you. You know, and people might think like, oh, I don't want to work with someone because then it's not mine or it's not my idea. It's like everything that came out of working at the agency, of course, like ultimately they did the work and did a lot of helping us, but like it all came out of what we were telling them and what we were doing, and it was a lot of thought exercises, a lot of brand strategy. So it's a real collaborative effort. I think a lot of people might get kind of like their ego up in a bunch that like, oh, I didn't pick the name myself, so it can't be like I can't use it or something like that. So it's like, but
Yeah.
nothing's that original. You know, it's like it's ultimately all come out of the work that we've done over 5 years. So
Mhm.
yeah, it was super important to work with it. And by default, I generally hate agencies, but this was a good experience.
Good. Nice. When you're building the brand and the company, you know, you talked about like the kind of the pillars of the company and the essence of the company. How the heck do you decide that? Like, how do you go like this is going to be our brand identity? This is what we're going to stand for. Here's the things we're going to believe in. Like, where does that start for you?
It evolves over time. I think day one, it's kind of like, why are you doing what you're doing, and like what's important to you. Um, and it varies from business to business. I'll speak my own book because that's my experience. But for me, it was like building a brand around perseverance and kind of the journey we're all on as active people. And then as it grew, we started to get a brand ambassador network and thousands of people that could start telling us what the brand meant to them. And so, like a part of the rebrand process was talking to these people and getting thousands of inputs. Like ultimately, like one of the first things we did around the renaming process wasn't start to try and find names. It was just like, okay, let's truly define like what we do, like the space we occupy in this world. Like what are people that buy our product think about our brand? Because like before trying to come up with a new name, it's super important for us to understand like why they're buying in the first place, or the feeling they have, and then build a name or a rebrand up from that feeling. And ultimately, what we heard when I was interviewing, you know, our ambassadors or people I know or even myself, it's like they would buy or wear the product when they would X, and X was an important conference they were going to, a talk or an athletic event or a competition or something. And what all of that ultimately to me felt like was like some pursuit of our personal best. Like that's what they like. Our socks were ultimately like this kind of like motivator for them, a piece of clothing that like spoke to them and it was exciting for them and they loved the design. It made them feel a certain way and it made them feel confident. And so what we really took from that was like, well, our mission, like what we're really doing in here is like trying to inspire everyone's personal best. Like that's why we do what we do.
Mhm.
Um, and so from there, it was about just finding a name that could champion that message. And to us, it's like in pursuit of your personal best, one must be willing to kind of put themselves out there and carve their own way. And so like that's the amalgamation of those two worlds is words is outweigh, and that's how it builds on the mission and you know outweigh the odds. There's other kind of like little plays you can have on it, but
Yeah.
obviously that's not spelt correctly, but like whatever, it sounds cool.
Sounds
um but yeah, so that was like, how do you know it? I mean, I think it's just a lot about like listening to people that interact and like be open to it ever evolving and changing and making sure it stays authentic to your community, because like if you're not building and evolving to kind of the larger group of people that are really your true fans, then like why are you doing what you're doing? It's not like the business needs to be way more than you or anything. And then it's really just defining and solidifying the culture you want to have internally. And there's no science to this, which makes business building like exceptionally hard, because there's no cookie cutter way to do all of this. But I would say, like, if one of the main goals is just remaining authentic and mission driven, then usually you just figure it out as you go.
Yeah. How have you, and like I've seen The Office, like I said before, and I've seen the work environment. What have you done to like foster that work environment and create something that everybody's excited to go to? Because I feel like that's such a big part of building a team these days.
Again, I think it all comes down to kind of mission focus and people like seeing what we're just trying to do in the world, and like it's exciting to kind of be a part of that. And also, like, if the brand speaks to your values, like people want to like work on things that are exciting. You know what I mean? So like,
Mhm.
I don't think it's so much of a conscious effort of like, when we built at the new office, it was a super conscious effort of like, okay, like let's make sure we get better desks and standing desks. Like if we're an athletic company, like our desks should be kind of like, electric and stand and be able to kind of go up and down. And we should have some areas where there's different seating arrangements and space to kind of unplug and meeting. Like there's a lot of kind of considerations that went into the new office. But in the early days, it's like, it's hard. It's in the trenches. You don't have any money. You can't invest in like those things. So it's really, I think, about just like being super clear about like what the mission is and the values of the company. And then just making sure that you're hiring based on that, like it's like anything. It'd be like, why do people join CrossFit, right? It's because like they're interested in it, and ultimately like CrossFit's like a super passionate group of people about the sport, right?
Yeah.
And that's why they go. I think if someone wasn't passionate, like why the hell would they go suffer for that hour? It's just, they'd be like, they wouldn't do it. Like, so I say like people don't people keep coming back to CrossFit not because it's easy or like it's because they love doing it. So I'd say it's maybe similar to that. It's like, and it's really hard to pinpoint like what it is, but it's a part of the community. It's part of like a way of exercising, a way of achieving personal bests and continually trying to like improve. And that's what we try to do here. So I think like one of the things we do is offer our people a lot of autonomy and opportunity to kind of like try new things, make mistakes, like actually put work out that like reaches the customer and like see how um see how that's the results of that. So super exciting to get kind of feedback as an employee or a part of the business where like you see what you do as like a direct impact and you can be proud of that.
Yeah. That's awesome. Now, one thing we haven't talked about too is you guys have another brand as well, which is the Custom Labs Co. And tell me a little bit about what that is as well, because I mean, you have Outway, that's your primary brand, and then tell me about Custom Labs and what you guys do over there.
Yeah, so Custom Labs is a sub brand of Outway where we realized that like, and this is kind of an early realization, and in hindsight, I'll explain it now, which sounds like a master plan, but I just like was figuring it out as we were going in the early days. Really, what happened was like when I started the business, some of my old sponsors emailed me and were like, "Hey, I see you've started a little sock business, and we need socks for a promotional event. Can you make some for us?" I was like,
Mhm.
"Well, yeah. I mean, I don't see why not." So I did like
Yeah.
500 pairs of Muscle Milk socks and sent those, and it was like $3,000 or something. And I was like, whoa, that was easy. Like that was way better than selling, one pair at a time for $20.
Yeah.
And then I realized, okay, well, maybe there's a market of other brands that need socks, and slowly but surely realized that like we've built this set of skills like sourcing, manufacturing, designing products. Like why not use those skills in multiple different domains to generate revenue?
Mhm.
And so Custom Labs is a way to leverage our manufacturing, design, and expertise to create socks for other brands and sell at high volume. And there's a lot of benefits to doing that, some of which are cash flow, some of which are increasing our kind of order quantities with our manufacturers to get more favorable terms and pricing, et cetera. So there's, yeah, and it's also just kind of cool to kind of have a sub brand and business that relies on different market conditions, so that like it insulates the business and de-risks it a little bit. So yeah, so Custom Labs, like we'll do socks for brands like Red Bull, and then everything down to the local running group. So anyone out who's listening to this who wants custom socks for anything, wedding, conference, giveaway, customlabs.co, and we'll hook you up.
With some of the outsourcing and not the outsourcing, excuse me, the manufacturing and pulling from overseas. Have you noticed an impact from like the cost of gas prices and transportation right now? Like, does that impact you guys in any way, or has that become a factor?
Yeah, these things always impact us, and no industry is really insulated from it. It's just you just got to kind of work those sort of things into your forecasting. It's obviously an exceptionally trying time right now with still rolling lockouts throughout China, increasing gas prices, container prices, shipping prices, everything prices. We're in a very inflationary environment. So, yeah, there's challenges, but again, like none of these things are impossible to figure out. You just got to kind of roll with the punches.
Yeah.
But it definitely like weighs on your mind, you know?
Yeah. I mean, from a business owner standpoint, I feel like everything's going to weigh on your mind.
Well, that's to your point about like entrepreneurship's not easy, you know? It's like I'm definitely at the point in the journey where there's some things to really enjoy, you know, like I've got a lot of autonomy, I've got a great team. And so I've got some freedom, and I really enjoy this part of business that I'm in, where like my job is to do a lot of this kind of stuff and do a lot of meeting other entrepreneurs to try and, you know, like I really say like my goal is to just take as many inputs as possible to try and connect the dots in my head that I'm able to make sense of kind of like the really monumental moves we need to make, and then work with my core team, my direct reports to execute on those. So my goal is to really see the map and make sense of like how we connect the dots. And the way I found that's most successful doing that is like a lot of reading, a lot of podcasts, a lot of meeting with and talking with people. As much as doing this, you know, sometimes like I give myself ideas when I'm asked a question that maybe I haven't been asked before, and I have to explain something. I'm like, oh, actually, yeah, we do that, and that reminds me of this thing we need to do, and I'll get off this podcast and go write it down, and we'll execute on it. So
Nice.
I really enjoy that. But to your point, like it never you never get to turn it off. You know what I mean? Like you go
Yeah.
home and there's the stress of like, you know, your team grows, like you're dealing with all of that. Like the buck stops with you, you know? So like everything, any problem, big or small, funnels up to the top, and there's people that I have to help with it, but ultimately like the stress still lives with me. And like some of the like the rebrand was exceptionally trying. Like I think it was one of the more difficult 6 months of my entire life.
Yeah.
Like it was just it's hard to even explain how hard it was. So that's definitely the downside.
All right. Rob, on that note, before we go, what's your favorite? What's your go-to product? Is there a design that's like your like personal best? You're going into a big meeting, you're going to throw these ones on?
Yeah, like it changes. Basically any like for me, if I have like a really big event, I'll try and wear any sock design we have that's current or past to do with like outer space.
Okay.
So like rockets or planets or something, because like to me in humanity, it's always been like that's like the pinnacle of like ambition, is to try and go to the moon or try to go to Mars or something like that. So to me, when I wear those, that's like my small like way of saying like this is my to Mars moment, you know? So that's definitely like been something I gravitate towards. And like funny enough, like these caps that we have are like one of my favorite products. It's not even a sock, but we have like these caps because I think they just like they're like the socks of our head. Like they're like they look good, but they're athletic and technical. And I think we just really nailed it with this product. And I really enjoy the hat because then I don't have to do my hair, and it is like it's perfect. I love it. So um, yeah, that's kind of like my two favorite go-tos right now.
Awesome. All right. So on Instagram at Outway Socks.
Yep.
And then you can find you guys are all over the internet. Outway Socks. Anywhere else they can find you guys?
Yeah, we got outway.com. So it's just OUTWAY, all one word.com, which was great. Not very cheap, but it was good to get like a 6-letter domain. It was like part of the process of like going down the checklist of things we wanted with a new brand name was like a domain name available. And we're working on background trying to get at Outway on all the social platforms, but that's way more complicated than like buying domains. But yeah, so at Outway Socks across all socials. We're most active on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Outway.com. If you sign up to our newsletter, you get discount on product, and you get also access to other promotions. And then people are interested in following me. And maybe you enjoyed some of this story, maybe not, but I'm pretty active on Twitter and LinkedIn, just Rob Fraser, at Rob Fraser, ROBB Fraser, Fraser. And I just kind of post in real time, almost daily, what's going on in our business and things that are going on. So if people want to stay connected with our story and see kind of behind the scenes, then that's where you can connect with me. And I try to answer DMs and questions that come through when possible as well.
Awesome. Rob, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for telling the story, and congrats on the new rebranding.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. Super fun.
Appreciate it. All right, guys, have a great week training.